It's an amazing thing how certain injustices just fizzle away, they disappear into the ether. This is in True the Vote. This was my homework for the week. I just had to catch up and see what the latest on it was. We talked about it last week. The company's Connect, not Connect. So the company's called Connect, which I guess makes more sense. A digital company suing the two of the individuals allegedly behind 2000 Mules, Engelbrecht and Phillips, who were working with True the Vote to get to the bottom of what they felt were highly fortified elections. They're being sued for defamation, computer hacking, other stuff by this company called Connect on the basis that the two of them and another third party obtained information on the CEO of Connect, an individual named Yu, that they released. Guy got death threats, all sorts of stuff. They hacked computers to get private information that they release. Their side of the story is that this company was allegedly storing on servers in China voter information that they were not supposed to be storing on servers in China. They worked with the FBI to get information to the FBI for the purposes of advising the FBI of what they thought was illegal activity, and made statements in podcasts that Connect, the company says, defame the company through computer hacking, led to all sorts of problems for Mr. Yu, CEO. And then the big 180 twist in it is recently the CEO got indicted on embezzlement charges. And Robert, as you explained last week, on the basis that he was in fact violating the terms of the contract by storing voter information on servers in China, and therefore violated the terms of the contract, thus committing fraud and embezzlement, whatever. The judge in the case issued a TRO at the request of Connect, enjoining the two defendants to disclose the name of a third party who they allege also worked with the FBI, might have been a confidential informant, to disclose his or her name that had a role in collecting, gathering some of this allegedly unlawfully obtained information. And the judge said, give the name up or you're going to go to jail for contempt. And apparently, so I was reading a little more into it. Apparently there was allegedly from the court filing some back and forth where the defendants were playing games, saying, we don't have this information, or we didn't get it from one of the computers at issue. Clarified, they said, any computer, you have to tell us who got this information. They then ultimately went with, it's a third party who's a confidential informant. We're not disclosing the name of our source, period. This is on a temporary restraining order at an early stage of a proceeding. And last Friday, they were found in contempt. And this Monday, 5 days ago, they were hauled off and detained. And that's where any coverage of this story ends, basically 4 or 5 days ago. And they're still in custody. They're still detained on civil contempt. The court order, I pulled it up, day to day, it says, so that it's not shocking. It's not indefinite. It's day to day until they comply. They hold the key to their own cell, I think someone said. And there's some nominal daily fine of $85 for non-compliance. They don't get out until they pay that either. But it looks like they're in jail, detained, until they disclose the name of what is allegedly either a source or a confidential informant working with the FBI. And that's it. That's the injustice of the week. And I don't know what to make of it. I don't know how it happens. I don't know how you can get out of jail for this. I don't know how they can't discover the name through other means if before detaining people. Robert, I mean, try to make this one make sense for people.
I mean, I think it's insane. It's a misuse and abuse of contempt power. It's why federal courts probably never should have had, any state or federal court probably should have never had this power, because the theory was that courts needed to be able to control their own courtroom and needed to have some means to enforce their orders. And consequently, that's where contempt power originated. The problem is the entire idea of separation of powers is negated when you give a court executive power. Just like the same problem exists when you give the legislative branch executive power, or you give the executive branch, as we'll get into, legislative or adjudicatory power. The whole point of separation of powers is that you should have to go to another branch of government and get their agreement before you can take certain kinds of action. And it negates all of that when you allow a court to just usurp that for itself. And that's what contempt power is. And I think it's more argument for over time limiting these things, circumscribing, the scope and scale of these things. Because here there's a discovery process, right? And that discovery process, you ask for certain information. If they don't give you that information, you move to compel it. Even if after the court orders it's compulsion, you don't give it, then there are certain specific proportionate remedial sanctions. What's not done is jailing people right out of the gate of the case on a case that may have no merit whatsoever because you want discovery accelerated, circumventing that entire due process. And that's what the court has done. The court said, I'm going to demand you produce certain information right out of the gate before we even see whether the case has any credibility, before we see whether the case has legal merits. And if you don't participate in this part of the discovery, you go to jail until you do. And that's just not the way the rules are supposed to work. It completely ignored. This is a judge who's a power-mad judge, Reagan appointee, appointed, frankly, on affirmative action grounds. You know, he wasn't appointed because he was the brightest light on the judicial block. He was appointed because Republicans love affirmative action more than Democrats do, especially during the Reagan-Bush era. I mean, I knew I had an idiot judge when I had a Republican affirmative action appointee, almost without fail. Some of the dumbest judges on the planet. Not as dumb as Kamala Harris. She's still the dumbest lawyer I ever dealt with. But, you know, and it's not because there aren't very intelligent people that could fit the affirmative action quotient. It's because they look for people that fit a certain political profile with the affirmative action quotient, namely authoritarians. And that's what they got. They got petty authoritarians that love to abuse their power when they're like Cartman from South Park when they get to play judge. And that's what this strikes me as. Now, I believe they're going up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, trying to get a reversal of this ridiculousness. It's quite clear that they're going to wait out their time in jail rather than rat out their source, which probably for them over the long haul boosts their bona fides. I mean, these are the people who helped provide the information behind 2,000 Mules. They've been criticized for not getting into more detail. The problem is there's all kinds of privacy complications with disclosure of some of that information. And here they had a source, and their source, they have reason to believe, is a confidential informant of both the federal and the state government. And they will not disclose that, rat out that source, just like a member of the press wouldn't rat out their source when the confidentiality was critical to getting the information that clearly was accurate. Because their allegations that this guy was connected to China is proven by the fact that a Soros lefty district attorney in California has indicted him because he was illicitly storing information on Chinese servers.
I mean, that's the one question is they're suing for defamation on the basis that the statements caused harm and were false. They could be, maybe they weren't storing certain types of information, but by virtue of the indictment itself, it would seem that truth being the absolute defense or true enough. But Robert, the fact that I was just comparing this to the Alex Jones in a sense, like this looks like fabricate the default on discovery so you can then go with the extreme sanction. But even in this case, it's not default verdict. It's go to jail for civil contempt, which could have been done to Alex Jones in theory to compel production of whatever documents they say were not. I mean, is this judge learning a bit from the absurdity and saying, okay, I'm not going to go full default verdict. I'm just going to go civil contempt, which to make it more palatable, it'll be more politically acceptable.
Well, it's because he's desperate to. Well, I think he's a power mad judge, but his basis is that this information is somehow essential and to the injunctive emergency injunctive relief, and that the focus is on the information as opposed to a judgment against the defendants.
All right. Okay, that's fascinating. Well, I guess, on the
subject, couldn't issue a default judgment anyway, because I mean they haven't even got to the motion to dismiss stage.
Well, why would they get there, Robert, if they're not participating in complying with the TRO ultimate sanction? But on the subject of not, so by the way, everyone should know they're still in jail. It's something that faded from the news 5 days ago because it's not a very judicially acceptable thing to jail people like this. So maybe make a bit more of a social media stink about it and fight in the court of public opinion.